Hello, everybody, and welcome into today's episode of Around the Slice. Football is finally back with 2024 Buffalo Bills training camp kicking off a few days ago, the first day this year being Wednesday, July 24th. And I'm here to talk to you today and bring you my biggest notes and also biggest takeaways from the first 3 days of training camp from this year. So the information today I will be covering will be from Wednesday, July 24th, Thursday, July 25th, Friday, and of course, Friday, July 26th, like I just said, a 3 day span. Um, so I'm not kind of all over the place with training camp because there's a lot going on, of course. I kind of want to go just position by position and give you my general thoughts and the biggest takeaways, like I said, on each position group, all the way from quarterback to running back to secondary and safety. Nothing on kicker and punter because they haven't really done kicking and punting work in 7-on-7 individual drills or the 11-on-11 team drills. But let's start with QB, and we are of course going to start with Josh Allen. Now he did have a few miscues on Friday. What I mean by that is he had 3 interceptions in a row. So 3 interceptions in the span of 4 plays. I'm going to break it down quick. The first one was when targeting Mack Hollins deep downfield. He kind of overshot Josh Allen, that is, overshot Mack Hollins and overthrew it over his head. It sounds like there was kind of a miscommunication there with Mack Hollins as a new weapon, and Hollins kind of broke off of a route stem a little too early, according to reports and from what I've seen and heard. He was supposed to run a little deeper route, so we just kind of broke off of his route stem a little too early. The second interception, that's a huge asterisk, second quote-unquote interception, because I say that because Christian Benford was like shoving Khalil Shakir, I think it was, to the ground, basically grabbing him the whole time. Like in a real game, it would like what 1,000% be called a defensive DPI, basically defensive pass interference penalty. So take that with a grain of salt. And then the third one was a clear miscommunication between just Josh Allen and Keon Coleman. Keon Coleman ran the wrong way and Josh Allen threw it the other way, and it was just waiting there for Kaiir Elam. So, and the 3 players that got the interceptions, it was Taylor Rapp, then Christian Benford, albeit a crap ton of holding on the play, and then thirdly and lastly, Kaiir Elam. But minus those few miscues, I wanted to get to Josh Allen has looked and felt absolutely surgical in training camp this year. Now, you might say, well, Aiden, why are you bringing this up? It's Josh Allen. Yes, I would tend to agree with you at that point. It's Josh Allen. Josh Allen standing out and showing out in training camp and being clearly the best player on the field isn't some breaking news. It isn't some mind-blowing thing. He should be one of, if not the best player out there at training camp. But I emphasize this specifically this year, that he's surgical, because these are all new weapons. Dalton Kincaid's a tight end. I fully expect him to have 1,000 yards this year and 100 plus targets, and possibly even expected 100 plus catches, give or take. So he's at tight end. But I talk about actual wide receivers. There's only one actual wide receiver from the wide receiver position that has caught a single pass from Josh Allen in his career, that being Khalil Shakir. And he's quote unquote the vet of this room. He joked about the other day. He's only going into year 3 with the Bills and the NFL as a whole and NFL altogether. So I want to bring up Josh Allen showing out in training camp because these are all new weapons. And apparently they haven't wasted any time. The offense has been on fire, minus those 3 interceptions that Josh Allen threw. And it was at the very end of practice. So he almost went 3 whole days without throwing interceptions. And usually it takes the offense like the first 3 or 4 days or so to, sometimes as long as some rare cases, as long as the first week or so, to knock the rust off, if you will. And the defense is always a big step ahead of the offense in to start training camp, especially because the offense has to gel and the offense has to get together and all that, especially this year. But they're firing on all cylinders, and that's really encouraging. There hasn't been many miscommunication issues. There hasn't been many timing issues with Josh Allen and his new receivers. That's really encouraging to see. So I know Josh Allen standing out isn't a big deal, but under these parameters and under these circumstances. It's really encouraging to see with all his new weapons. Next, bullet I've written down here, again, just talking about my biggest takeaways and general thoughts. Shane Buechele sounds like he has some, by all reports, it's not like he's some like, it's not like he's going to threaten for the QB2 and backup job. I firmly believe that he will be QB3 / practice squad guy. They'd love a guy in that role like a Matt Barkley, who the last 2 or 3 years has been, or most importantly right now, Shane Buechele. But it sounds like Shane Buechele has some pretty underrated arm talent working with the third-team offense and has some pretty decent zip on the ball. Josh Allen, if he plays, he's only going to play a series or so, or maybe even a quarter, like McDermott likes to do the second preseason game. I assume Mitchell Trubisky will get the first start and first crack in preseason, if you will. But we're going to see Shane Buechele a lot in preseason, and he's going to be working with a lot of rotational players trying to fight for this roster, bond the depth chart guys and new faces. But it sounds like Shane Buechele is a pretty decent practice squad guy, who has like the secrets of Patrick Mahomes, if you will, because he was with the Chiefs for the first 2 years of his career. So he has that intel, which it's not like a huge advantage, but I'm sure he can tell him some tips, just like last year, about, hey, this is what Andy Reid likes to do and whatnot. So sounds like he has some pretty underrated zip on the ball, and I'm encouraged as him as a practice squad option. Going to the running back position, first thing I got here, minus a fumble in the very first play of practice on Thursday, Ray Davis has really stood out, showing off his burst and pass-catching acumen and ability out of the backfield. I just want to explain the kind of fumble real quick. Again, it was on Thursday. I don't think it was Josh Allen's fault, but Josh Allen gave him like turn around and gave him a little pitch, the behind the line of scrimmage things, and hopefully they can turn upfield and do a juke move or two. It was a pitch, and I think Ray Davis just took his eyes off it or wasn't expecting it, and he fumbled the ball, and then I think it was Kaiir Elam who recovered the fumble. That doesn't matter, but that's a timing issue. Maybe not issue is the right word, but that's kind of a new face, new place, kind of that mantra. Like, you got to get that timing down. Like, it's not James Cook. Like, it's not Devin Singletary like it was for a handful of years with Josh Allen. It's not even Ty Johnson. It's Ray Davis as a rookie. But other than that, like, he's looked really explosive. He looks like he has some bursts. Like, he's not the he's not the fastest guy. Like, but he's got a stumpy build. He's like 5'8", 225. He will be that goal line back. Josh Allen had 15 rushing touchdowns last year. I love Josh Allen take off from rushing, especially going from Ken Dorsey to Joe Brady when he upped Josh Allen's rushing time significantly. That was good, but Allen had 15 rushing touchdowns last year. I don't want him putting his body in harm's way like that. I think like 6, 7, 8, like not more than 8, somewhere around there. 6, 7, 8 rushing touchdowns is fine. But our goal line back for the last really 3 or 4 years even has been Josh Allen. We've never really had that. We wanted that to be Damien Harris. He had a severe neck injury in week 5. He just played 4 games with us. Now he's unfortunately had to medically retire because Latavius Murray, at 34 years old now, going on 34 at least. He looked fresh the first 6 or 7 games last year, but then he just was nothing. Like, body broke down last year. And then I like Ty Johnson, but is he an RB3? Is he really a true goal line back? So I think Ray Davis can be that. And listen, I don't want to sound harsh here, but I don't really care about what running backs runs look like in a practice setting like this in training camp. Like, the pads, they haven't even come on yet. They probably will early next week at the earliest, but the pads haven't even come on yet. And even when the pads do come on, yeah, they're thudding up sometimes, but they still can't tackle in full and tackle wrap to the ground and wrap them up to the ground. So when running backs rip off big runs, I know everyone cheers and whenever they see 35, 40-yard run from Ray Davis in this case, yeah, that's great, but I don't really care about non-padded runs in practice when the guys can't even be really touched. But it's encouraging and to see out of Ray Davis, not like James Cook. I think he's a kind of a mix of James Cook and Ty Johnson to a certain degree, where he has that pass catching, really high level pass catching ability like James Cook, and he has that really high level running between the tackles like Ty Johnson. He's just not the most athletically gifted guy in the world, and he didn't really test like off the charts. He had okay testing, but it's not like he had a blazing 40 time or anything at the combine or Senior Bowl rather, or both. I don't know. But yeah, I think he's a good mix of those, our other two running backs. And when I say receiving ability out of the backfield of Ray Davis, I don't just mean little bubble screens, little bubble screens for him, or these little pitches or wheel routes. Like they at Kentucky, he went to 3 programs. I think it was like Vanderbilt, a second program that I can't remember. Sorry, off the top of my head. And then Kentucky. At all 3 schools, especially Kentucky, his last year, his 4th year in college being his senior year, or 5th year in college being his senior year, because he's an older guy. He showed off like pass catch ability, like downfield, in the middle of the field, like downfield on some like straight outside routes. And so that's interesting. He's a guy that can maybe line up in the slot along with James Cook. He can mix and match those two. I don't think they'll ever be on the field together, but on goal line, we know James Cook's frame. He's bulked up a little bit, gained some muscle this offseason, if you will, but he still doesn't look like a prototypical goal line back in this league. So Ray Davis would be that. Coming off the Ray Davis hype, it is very much a competition and battle right now for RB2 between Ray Davis and Ty Johnson. I just explained the Ray Davis thing. I don't think Ray Davis is great in pass protection, but I think he can get the job done there. Like, again, stumpy build. I keep saying it, 5'8", 225. So he has all the makings of really good pass pro guy, really good pass blocker at the running back position, which the Bills value highly. Like, they value blockers at the running back position, whether I liked it or not. That's why James Cook was off the field, but that's why Latavius Murray was on the field over him so much, not necessarily getting carries, but for that known pass blocking specialty and pass blocking ability that he provides. We know James Cook can't do it at all. We know Ty Johnson is a below average at it. And right now, Ray Davis is slightly above average blocker, but in a year or two, maybe even half a year, as soon as half a year in a few months, he'll be a really great pass blocker in this league, I feel like. So maybe that's his path to being RB2 over Ty Johnson. He has a really great preseason, shows out, because we're going to see him a lot. He has a really great preseason, and he shows that he has all the makings of really great pass blocker, and maybe develops further along than we might think right now. But on the other hand, like, they have Ty Johnson, who just looks and feels, heading like after the first few days of training camp here, like RB2 right now. Like, he is just kind of ho-hum with him in training camp because he's the veteran, but that's just it. Like, he's a veteran in this league. He started the Bills year on the practice squad, and then once Damian Harris got injured, he started the first 2 or 3 weeks after being signed to the permanent roster for last season as RB3 behind Latavius Murray. But then he was Latavius Murray. Then he passed up Latavius Murray when Latavius Murray went to RB3 and Ty Johnson went to RB2. And like I've said multiple times in this podcast, before, Ty Johnson is kind of a jack of all trades for Joe Brady and this offense. He's not like great or even like elite at anything really, but he's good. He gives you a little bit of everything at a really good level. Inside zone, outside zone, run between the tackles, outside the tackles, elite special teams ace, receiving out of the backfield, goal line back if you want to be. He gives you short yardage. He gives you a little bit of everything. So right now, heading into the preseason, after the first few days of training camp, it is a legit competition. And I wouldn't give one leg over the other. I think Ray Davis and Ty Johnson right now are tied for RB2. And in preseason, I think they'll split the RB2 reps. And for the first month or so of the season, I could even see them splitting the RB2 reps. But it's just a matter of time before I think Ray Davis takes over as RB2. Is that as early as October or November? Or are we going to have to wait till December or January in the playoffs to figure that out? I don't know, but something really to keep an eye on. And then my last point on the running backs here, Darrynton Evans and Frank Gore Jr. look like great practice squad candidates. If I were to give the leg up to someone right now, I would say Darrington Evans, not to make the practice squad, but if they're only going to keep one running back in the practice squad, which teams tend to do, if they keep both, that's another conversation. Both will make it the practice squad. But if they keep one, I would give a slight leg up to Darrington Evans right now because he's burst off a few, from all accounts, a few kind of bursty runs, a few long runs, 40, 50 yards, and he has athleticism, which Frank Gore Jr. has none of. Frank Gore Jr.'s very frail frame and tiny frame and undersized from Southern Miss. Sorry, but it is what it is. It's harsh, but it's the truth. But Darrington Evans has got opportunities in the kick return game from all accounts of practice. So I think that's what gives him the leg up on the practice squad if they only keep one guy. But Frank Gore Jr. on the first day of practice, on training camp practice on Wednesday, it was caught a really nice diving catch-esque touchdown in the corner of the end zone. So that just a little flip pass from Josh Allen, and they were heavily emphasizing red zone that day. So I think Frank Gore's, I don't think there's any path to the 53-man roster right now. I kind of blanked there for a minute. Sorry about that, but I think James Cook, Ty Johnson, Ray Davis are three locks for this roster. Really no competition there. It's just a matter of the order behind James Cook, like I said just a few minutes ago. But we're going to see a ton of Darrington Evans, Frank Gore Jr. in the preseason because you know what you have with James Cook and Ty Johnson. And Ray Davis as a rookie, so maybe you don't want to expose him that much because he's a fourth-round pick rookie who looks to have a somewhat big role on this offense as the season goes along. Maybe not to begin, but later on towards the playoffs maybe. So Frank Gore Jr. and Darrington Evans are going to get a ton of work in the preseason. Right now, I give the leg up to practice squad spot to Darrington Evans because Frank Gore Jr. is just undersized. And but the production he had at Southern Miss was off the charts. He had 2 straight 1,000+ rushing seasons in each of those. So that's really impressive. But that's just my read, if you will, right now on the Darrington Evans and Frank Gore Jr. situation right now. Both are prime and great practice squad candidates. But if they only keep one running back on the practice side, which I assume they will, I'm going to go with Ty Johnson, assuming he's not claimed off waivers after initial cuts. Slight leg up. Wide receiver, I got quite a bit to get to here because I don't want to say there's animosity or controversy, but this has been a huge talking point this last season. We beat it to death at this point. Let's move on. But no Stefon Diggs, no Gabe Davis. So that's over 300. I think the exact number was there's 305 vacated targets in this offense now that those two are leaving behind. So my first point here is Keon Coleman will be relied upon early and often this year in heavy usage. And the Sean McDermott and Joe Brady and the rest of the coaching staff, including wide receivers coach Adam Henry, mainly Joe Brady, though, have not wasted any time getting him on the field with Josh Allen to build chemistry and giving him all the opportunities in the world. This is significant. Keon Coleman has not worked with any other quarterback other than Josh Allen for a single day, not Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. All he's worked with is Josh Allen. No reps with Mitch Trubisky. No reps with Shane Buechele with the second or third team, respectively. Just Josh Allen with the first team offense with the rest of the starters. This kid is really, really going to show off. And he's by all accounts, videos and photos from the social media teams and different Bills social media team, and different beat reporters, he is a very popular kid, very popular guy at training camp over the first few days. Other than Josh Allen, he's probably the most popular. The kids are screaming for him. Every catch he makes draws oohs and ahs from the crowd there. They clap him up all the time. And speaking of those plays, on Wednesday, first day training camp practice, Keon Coleman made the highlight of the day, play of the day, if you will. I want to get this right specifically. Hauling in a catch in the corner of the end zone. So it was like a toe tap catch where he barely got 2 feet in, but he did. So toe tap swag, if you will. Where he was in the corner of the end zone, toe tap catch, like I just said, working against Jamarcus Ingram. And Jamarcus Ingram was pulling his jersey right at the end, surely to draw a flag in a real game. But Keon Coleman hauled it in while being held heavily by Jamarcus Ingram and falling backwards. The body control and concentration at the catch point and hands of Keon Coleman are really good. So this Coleman's going to be relied on heavily often like I said, it's very, very significant. You can tell from these training camp practices who's working with who. If they're working with Josh Allen all the time, like Keon Coleman is with the first team, then they're going to be a for sure starting huge part of this offense, especially for a rookie like Keon Coleman, relied upon heavily. Very significant that he hasn't worked with any other single quarterback for a single day out of the 3 days we've seen so far of training camp, Bills training camp this year in 2024. Training camp, he's only worked with Josh Allen, no Mitchell Trubisky or Shane Buechele, like I said, second or third team respectively, just Josh Allen. So that's really, really encouraging. And then Curtis Samuel can line up anywhere. He's taken reps in the backfield, he's taken reps in the slot, he's taken reps outside, and by all accounts and measures and reports, I should say rather, he's thrived in any spot he's been in. He's really going to be Joe Brady's Swiss Army knife, if you will, in this offense. No, I'm not comparing. I'm about to say this guy's name, and I'm not saying he's nearly as talented as this guy or nearly as productive over his career as this guy, but he's like Deebo Samuel light for the Bills. Like he's Bills' version of Deebo Samuel in San Francisco. Deebo Samuel lines up in the backfield. Deebo Samuel lines up at the outside. He just doesn't really line up in the slot. So Curtis Samuel has versatility like that. Now, lining up in the backfield, do I want him to get 15 carries a game from Joe Brady in this offense? No. From the backfield? No, not even close. Like that's taking away a big chunk of guys like James Cook and Brady Davis and Ty Johnson, mainly James Cook. But if he can get 4 or 5 carries a game or jet sweeps a game to keep the defense honest, keep the defense guessing, and to keep the defense on their toes, if you will, I'm all for that. So throw Curtis Samuel wherever you want, and he's just going to thrive at any spot. I said before in the beginning of this episode, when I was talking about the tight ends earlier, when I was talking about Dalton Kincaid specifically, earlier, Dalton Kincaid is going to lead this team in receiving yards, and catches, targets, possibly even receiving touchdowns. But in terms of pure receiving yards and numbers and stats and whatever, what have you, Curtis Samuel will not be far behind, in my opinion. I think he'll be close to 1,000 yards. I think he'll assert himself as really the true, like, alpha, quote-unquote alpha of this offense. He's very familiar with Joe Brady. He had over 1,000 yards from scrimmage, 800-something receiving yards, and 300-something rushing yards, respectively, in 2020. With the Panthers, Joe Brady is offensive coordinator. And that was significant that year because it was the COVID year. There were no OTAs. There was no minicamp. There wasn't even... There was training camp, but it was the own facility, so not nearly anything. And then there wasn't even preseason. So in his quarterback that year was Teddy Bridgewater. So if he can do that, Teddy Bridgewater and Joe Brady, he can for sure do it, plus more with Josh Allen and Joe Brady. I love his versatility. And fans aren't talking about him enough right now. Now they are after the first few days of training camp. But I loved this signing when they signed him. They signed him to a 3-year, $24 million deal, 8 per year. I was really afraid that someone was going to overpay for Curtis Samuel, even us, 11, 12 per year. But he got 8 per year. That's really a bargain. And I feel like with Ed Oliver last year, where he heavily outproduced and outplayed the contract that Bean gave him last June, so June of 2023, I think Curtis Samuel on the offensive side of the ball can heavily outperform that 3-year, $24 million contract, $8 million per year AAV, average annual value, $8 million per year. Outplay that contract. So Curtis Samuel, look for him in line up, backfield, slot, outside, and the season. It's going to be very fun to watch. I imagine they won't really use his versatility in the preseason. I imagine he's barely even going to line up in the backfield in the preseason just because they don't want to kind of expose his versatility to defenses, and they don't want to reveal their plans to the rest of the league. And honestly, that's a really good approach in my opinion. But yeah, next, Khalil Shakir. Khalil Shakir's hands are as reliable and consistent as they come. He seemingly never drops a pass and always seems to catch every single pass that comes his way. And that is a very, very big, that's like the opposite, right, of what we've had the last 2 training camps. His rookie year training camp and preseason, he was dropping the ball quite a bit, to much fans' ire, including myself. Last year, same thing, dropping balls left and right in preseason, a few too many times in the 3 preseason games, but he'll have a big role this year. And he, right now, in terms of purely wide receivers, not including Dawson Knox or Dalton Kincaid, again, just actual wide receiver position here, Khalil Shakir is the only guy that's caught a single pass from Josh Allen. Like I said earlier in this episode, the beginning of this podcast episode today, Khalil Shakir is the only one. So his hands are as reliable as they come, and he provides he's an all-around receiver. He's not like elite everything, but he's great, very good at a lot of different aspects of his game. He provides great run after catch ability, which is a big thing that the Bills have emphasized over the last few years, especially going into this year. He's a route running technician. He separates well downfield. I mean, to me, his best work is out of the slot, but he can line up inside, outside, really 50-50, maybe 60-40, 60% slot, 40% outside. A lot of the Bills guys they have this year can line up in the backfield like Curtis Samuel, or mainly on the outside or in the slot like Khalil Shakir. So I'm really encouraged. And just like last offseason, he's again working with Eric Moulds this offseason. So when you work with Eric Moulds, a Hall of Fame Bills wide receiver, that will help. Definitely. That will help your hands. That's a huge advantage he has personally, as Eric Moulds, quote unquote, a personal mentor and trainer for him. Moving on with the wide receiver observations. Mack Hollins, this guy has become like one of my favorite stories of training camp. Mack Hollins has been a fan favorite at camp so far. And I say fan favorite because every day he spends like 30, 40 minutes after practice signing autographs. Like, he's just a guy you notice. He's just a quirky guy, but like all his teammates say he's awesome. Joe Brady said he's the best person he's ever met. Like, he has just a very infectious personality, and he's just a leader. And apparently at 5 a.m. he's out there catching balls from the jugs machine and trying to run routes. And the guy's huge, right? He's 6'4", 225. He's got that big poofy hair. Like, he's a guy you notice. Like, he's got some quirky habits. Like, he wears no shoes. He doesn't use utensils in cafeteria. Like, he's got some quirky habits for sure, but you notice him. He's 6'4", 225, like the 6'4", 230, somewhere around there. The guy's built like an absolute titan. Like, he's an ace special teamer. In 3 of his 4 years at college, which was at UNC, he was a special teams captain his sophomore, junior, and senior respectively there before he entered the NFL. So yeah, like, he is becoming a very consistent target for Josh Allen, and he's rotating with Keon Coleman to get a ton of reps on the first team offense with Josh Allen, even Mitch Trubisky, but he's still rotating with Keon Coleman, gotten a ton of reps as a true X receiver in the outside with Josh Allen. He can separate well downfield, and I think like, everyone knows the special teams ability and acumen upside there is just elite special teams ace in this team, what have you, whatever. But I think he's going to attribute not a ton more, but a lot more than people and fans are thinking right now, especially heading into training camp. I said don't sleep on this signing once it originally happened. I love this signing. Well, I'm going to say I like this signing, and then the next week or so I ended up loving it because he is a true X receiver, and the Bills just haven't had that. So I'm not promising like 900, 950 yards and 8 or 9 touchdowns, but like, can he get 500, 600, 700 yards and like 5 or 6 touchdowns? I think that's absolutely in the realm of possibility. So yeah, Mack Hollins is a huge winner of training camp for me so far. And then MVS, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, known as MVS here going forward. MVS has gotten some first-team reps with Josh Allen, just not nearly as much as the other 4 guys ahead of him right now through the first few days of training camp, that being in no particular order: Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, and even Mack Hollins rotating him. So MVS has gotten very little time with Josh Allen. He's in an up-and-down training camp so far. Apparently, he's had a couple of drops, but some really nice deep threat plays. He is a true field stretcher. I don't think he'll get a lot of raw production. Like, I think he'll top out at like 300-400 yards, if that, and maybe 3 or 4 touchdowns, because he's a big-bodied red zone threat. But he can take the top off the defense with the speed, and I love his separation skills. But the more that I think about it, like, I don't think he'll be a guy that just absolutely flies downfield to get the ball. Like, when he flies downfield, that takes a defensive attention away from middle of the field targets like a Dalton Kincaid or a Curtis Samuel or a Khalil Shakir, who does his best work in the slot, like we already talked about and I mentioned a few minutes ago when talking about Shakir. So MVS's ability to take the top off of defenses and separate downfield at a very high level, the defense will have to respect that, and that opens up more targets for middle of the field guys to eat, if you will. Listen to Joe Brady, listen to Josh Allen, listen to the different receivers interviews like Curtis Samuel, Dalton Kincaid, Khalil Shakir. It's very obvious that and Dawson Knox. It's very obvious that the mantra this year that Joe Brady is instilling in his guys is everybody eats, and they're all okay with that. Even though there's no true number one alpha, I guess Dalton Kincaid, but alpha receiver that is at the actual wide receiver position, everybody eats. If maybe not one guy is going to go over 100 yards and one or two touchdowns each week, but maybe here and there they get close to that. Keon Coleman will contribute. Khalil Shakir will contribute week in and week out. Curtis Samuel will line up everywhere, backfield, slot, outside, like we've already talked about. Dawson Knox, he's been hoping to have a big rebound, bounce back year, whatever you want to call it, from a wrist injury last year. He just never looked right, even when he returned. Just a blocker. So there's not going to be that target hog this year outside of Dalton Kincaid at the receiver position. He's a tight end, but at the receiver position specifically. So everybody will eat, like everyone said. Now, I want to touch on the depth receivers real quick, that being Chase Claypool, Tyrell Shavers, Justin Shorter, KJ Hamler, and Andy Isabella. They've been very, very quiet through the first 3 days of training camp. None have really gotten, even a few reps at first team offense. Josh Allen in the first team offense. And that's pretty disappointing for a guy like Tyrell Shavers, who I thought would be my training camp darling. I might have to walk that back a little because in my training camp preview last week, Bills beat writer Ryan Talbot. By the way, go check that out. Awesome episode. Ryan does great work over there for Syracuse.com and myup.com in the Shout Buffalo Football Podcast with Matt Perino himself. Besides that plug, I'm brought up because Tyrell Shavers is my training camp darling that will push for the roster, but I don't know if he's really above Chase Claypool now. But Chase Claypool hasn't even really done that much. And then you have speed guys like KJ Hamler, Andy Isabella, and Justin Shorter, who I just think is so far down at this point, very raw. I don't know. 5-star recruit coming out of high school, one of the best in the nation. 2019 class, I think it was. Yeah, he played 4 years at Florida, or 2 years at Penn State, then transferred to Florida for 2 years at Florida. And he never really did anything in college. He never had 1,000 yards as a 5-star recruit. He never had double-digit touchdowns as a 5-star recruit, which you would expect. So the Justin Shorter is way down there. And the Andy Isabella, very quiet. The only thing I've heard from KJ Hamler is he's got opportunities in the kick return game, so we'll probably see him do that quite a bit in the preseason between KJ Hamler and Darrington Evans mainly, and Daquan Hardy. I'll touch on him later with the corner conversation. But the depth receivers, those 5 in particular, again, being Claypool, Shavers, Andy Isabella, KJ Hamler, and then Justin Shorter, who I have no confidence in at this point. Very quiet. Next, I want to point out seemingly who the starting trio of receivers have been through this first 3 days of training camp, specifically. The starting trio of wide receivers seems to be Curtis Samuel and Keon Coleman / Matt Collins on the outside. Keon Coleman and Matt Collins being those prototypical X downfield receivers. And then Khalil Shakir working at the slot. That seems to be the main trio of receivers. I guess technically 4 because Keon Coleman / Matt Collins have both gotten equal opportunity with Josh Allen with first team reps in the first team offense, But you can mix and match a lot of these guys. Curtis Samuel, we talked about, can line up in the backfield slot outside. Khalil Shakir can line up in the slot outside. Keon Coleman, his best work is a true prototypical X big downfield, big body control target, elite at the catch point, elite ball skills, underrated route running. But he can also be a big slot at times. Matt Collins is really just a downfield threat. And then mixing guys like MVS to take the top off a defense downfield to either get the ball thrown to him or open up targets for the middle of the field target and Samuel, Kincaid, and Khalil Shakir. So that seems to be our starting trio right now with Keon Coleman / Matt Collins on the outside, interchangeable there, and then Curtis Samuel at the other outside spot, Khalil Shakir in the slot, but I want to emphasize like these guys can line up everywhere and you can mix and match. And that point was brought to my attention even more by Joe Brady in his press conference on Thursday when he said, listen, we don't teach the pigeonhole. Basically, he alluded to the fact that we don't pigeonhole these guys into one spot. Like we don't say you're a Z, you're a Y, like you're an X, like you're a slot, you're outside. No, we teach them concepts. We teach all receivers to get open and what the quarterback's eyes are doing so they can make themselves available to the quarterback. So they teach concepts more than anything else, more than pigeonholing these guys in the slot, outside X, Y, Z, whatever. And that proves and hammers home the point of the everybody eats in this offense mentality. So I really like the versatility in mixing and matching. But that seems to be a starting trio with Matt Collins too. Tight end. Dalton Kincaid is ready to absolutely explode in year 2. I know that's a pretty general statement. The one area where I thought Joe Brady I loved Joe Brady. He maximized Josh Allen rushing attempts. He upped those from Ken Dorsey. Didn't do that at all, barely any. And then he leaned way more heavily into the run game. Loved that. But he involved everyone else outside just Stefon Diggs and Gabe Davis. Loved that, mainly Stefon Diggs. But the only thing I wish he did more play action, which he did still more than Ken Dorsey, but I want to see a lot more still. And then, but mainly, he didn't really utilize Dalton Kincaid downfield much. His ADOT was pretty low the second half of the year when Joe Brady took over as interim offensive coordinator, now full-time OC with full-time offensive coordinator with the Bills, but he had a low ADOT, so I'm looking for more down-the-field usage and down-the-field production for Dalton Kincaid as an extension of Joe Brady utilizing him there. But I think he's like 110, 120 targets somewhere around there is coming his way, and like 100 to 110 catches off of that. And then I think he'll have over 1,000 yards, which is very rare to do that if you're not like Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta now, I guess, Mark Andrews, George, those top 5 elite tight ends in this league. Next tight end point, even with the big emergence, really huge emergence, explosion of Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox is still going to be a very big part of this offense. I think as much as I don't like it, the 2 tight end stuff, the 12 personnel stuff will be a big part of this offense. Maybe it's like 60, 65% each game, and that ramps up as the season goes on. I'm fine with that now. I've come around to that idea because Dalton Kincaid, like I love the guy, but he can't really block. Like to save his life at this point in his career, just going in the second league, yeah, he can develop that. But I think it'll be 2 or 3 years where we look at him as a good blocker. And Dawson Knox still isn't some elite blocker, but after his first 2 or 3 years in the league, he has become a very good blocker heading into year 9. Oh my God, it's been 6 years in the league. Ooh, okay. I didn't realize that he'd been in the league that long. It felt like he was just drafted yesterday. But what was I saying? I was saying that Dawson Knox can see all of those edges in the run game or even the pass game, but more run blocking. But Dawson Knox is still a huge red zone threat. Like Josh Allen trusts him. Like he's Josh Allen's guy. Like he has had huge moments. The game-winning touchdown against the Chiefs 2 regular seasons ago. He has had the opening touchdown for the Bills in playoff games the last 4 years. So the first touchdown of the postseason for the Buffalo Bills has been Dawson Knox the last 4 years. So Josh still trusts him very much. They have a great off-the-field relationship. And between him and Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox is still going to be a pretty big part of this offense. Next, there may be a legit competition between Quentin Morris and Zach Davidson. Like everyone was hyping up Zach Davidson. He had, by all accounts, had a phenomenal spring between OTAs and mandatory minicamp. OTAs in May, and the mandatory minicamp in June, and then a month or so off until training camp. And apparently, he's been a really good blocker, and he's been great in special teams, even though they haven't done many special teams drills at practice. There might be a legit competition here between Quentin Morris and Zach Davidson. The only thing is, if you caught one of them, it will be very, very much easier. I think it's almost a 99.9%, nearly 100% guarantee that you would get Zach Davidson back to your practice squad as opposed to Quentin Morris. If you cut him, he's not getting through waivers and back to your practice squad. Someone will claim him immediately. I've said this before. It's a luxury that we, the Bills, it's a luxury that we have Quentin Morris as our tight end 3 right now. I think he could be a very serviceable tight end 2, even for some teams. He just happens to have 2 really good tight ends, and Dalton Kincaid who's a burgeoning superstar, and Dawson Knox, who I just said is still looking to be a very big, huge part of, maybe not huge, but very big part of this offense still. So I would keep Quentin Morris, but kind of look out. Zach Davidson doesn't get a ton of work in preseason because I don't know if you play Dalton Kay and Dawson Knox a whole ton of preseason, if at all. So Zach Davidson, Quentin Morris, and Trey McKitty. Trey McKitty just as like I like him as a practice squad option, but tight end 3 is really between Quentin Morris and Zach Davidson. And if Zach Davidson continues to pick up steam here in the next week or so in training camp, even the next few days or so in training camp, rather, and Quentin Morris continues to stay quiet as of going into his 3rd year in the league now, who knows? Maybe he does bump him off after a really dazzling spring and hopefully training camp. Next, offensive line. I might have misassessed this situation coming in once Mitchell Morse was cut. Like, I knew they were very right. The Bills were and Brandon Beane and the Bills were very intentional about moving on. It all felt very intentional. They cut Mitch Morse as a veteran. They moved Dave Weyers up from the bench to the left guard, and it came out immediately that Connor McGovern was moving on at left guard and center. So much so that last year, Connor McGovern's Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane have even admitted, look, if Mitchell Morse went down to injury, it was going to be Connor McGovern moving over to center from left guard, and maybe Dave Edwards left guard, and not Ryan Bates like we all assumed. But David Edwards and Connor McGovern are locked and loaded starters at this point. I know it's only been 3 days of training camp, but they've played every single snap at the first team, and they haven't. Neither of them have had a single bit of competition through 3 days at all. I thought Cedric Van Pant-Granger could push Connor McGovern, or I guess Aaron Kromer thinks he has guard versatility, so David Edwards too. But speaking of Cedric Van Pant-Granger, he has worked the 3rd team offense and the 3rd team offensive line, throughout all 3 days of training camp so far. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. He never even moved up to the 2nd team. Not even close. Will Clapp was getting reps at him at center and the 2nd team offensive line with the 2nd team offense there with Mitch Trubisky. Cedric Van Pant-Granger, 3rd team offensive line, 3rd team center with Shane Buechele. I'm not going to say that's concerning, but that's very interesting to me that he can't even pass up Will Clapp right now, but Connor McGovern and David Edwards have no competition right now from Cedric Van Pant-Granger or Alec Anderson or literally anyone like that. Next, La'el Collins. I don't want you to see a harsh year. He's had ACL injuries over the last 3 years, 2 torn ACLs in the last 3 years, I believe, across with the Cowboys and then Bengals, an aging veteran. He's been a total mess at tackle, according to all accounts, measures, and reports. He's been a total mess and a disaster. I think he's just switched over to guard full time. So I think at this point, his best shot at a roster spot is at guard. And at that point, I don't even know if he makes the switch, and he doesn't even make it because 2 guys, Tylan Grable and Travis Clayton, have both held their own to start training camp. Notable here, Grable has even worked with the 2nd team offensive line in some cases here and there, more reps than anyone thought at this point early in training camp. And at tackle and guard. And Aaron Kromer, if you're a depth guy fighting for this roster, fighting for a roster spot, you're going to be cross-trained. You like it or not, you're going to be cross-trained, tackle and guard. We're starting to see it with Richard Garage. We're starting to see it with Travis Clayton. And now, most importantly, we're starting to see it with Tylan Grable. So I don't really think La'el Collins is in danger of being passed up by Travis Clayton. But I do think that he could be in danger of being passed up by one of Tylan Grable, Richard Garage, or even both. If La'el Collins doesn't make the switch to guard, or he does and it still looks pretty awful like he has been. So watch out for Tylan Grable. Defensive tackle, Ed Oliver has been absolutely dominant. Excuse me. Let me start over. Ed Oliver. There you go. Ed Oliver has been absolutely dominant to start training camp. Is an absolute menace for the offensive line to handle. Obviously, he heavily outplayed that contract last year. He just tends to disappear in the playoffs, specifically against the Chiefs. Got to ramp that up and have that level of play in the playoffs too. But other than Matt Milano, I think he's the most dominant and important defensive player on this defense heading into this year. And you can even argue he is the best with Matt Milano coming off a torn ACL and a fractured/broken leg. Dwayne Carter could after just 3 days, be a legit rotational piece sooner rather than later. Obviously, Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones is a starter. But at DT3, with that direct backup to either of those guys, I think you could very easily pass Austin Johnson. I think right now Dwayne Carter is your direct backup at 3 tech to Ed Oliver, and Austin Johnson is your direct backup as a high-level run stuffer to Daquan Jones at 1 tech. But Dwayne Carter, legit pass rush piece, and he has looked miles better than Deshaun Williams, by all accounts, who's looking to kind of have a big training camp and preseason and make this roster. I just don't think there's room for him. And for a borderline fringe roster guy who's trying to fight for a roster spot, you need him to make some noise. You need him to be noticeable, and he really hasn't been. Defensive end. Greg Rousseau's in the same boat as Ed Oliver. Both are in midseason form by all accounts. Both are kind of ready to kind of not Ed Oliver take off because he took off last year and broke out, but Greg Rousseau never really had more than 6 sacks in a season. I don't really know if he's that sack artist, so I'm picking him as my breakout on defense, maybe breakout overall for the Bills for the 3rd straight year. If he doesn't do it this year, I'll just assume like he'll never be this high-level sack artist. But he's an elite run stuffer off the edge. So him and Oliver are both in midseason form. Von Miller looks like he's finally getting back to a somewhat version of the old Von Miller. Like, I'm not saying he'll have 9, 10, 11 sacks this year, but like, can he have 7 or 8? Like, unless he has like 7 or 8 sacks, like, I don't see any way where he's on this team next year. Like, I think he'll be one of those post-June 1st cuts once we get to next summer if he doesn't have at least 7 or 8 sacks. So, yeah, building off of that, though, there seems to be a legit competition for defensive end, too. Opposite. Obviously, Greg Rousseau is your first starting defensive end. But then, who is it? Is it going to be A.J. Epinesa or Von Miller? I would prefer it to be A.J. Epinesa. But if he's in a rotation with Von Miller, I wouldn't be mad. At this point in his career, I think Von Miller should be suited as a rotational pass rush guy and as a specialized pass rusher on long and late downs, because I don't think he's an every down player at this point. So on 3rd and long and 4th and long to seal the game, that quote-unquote closer like we signed him to be, and he was the first 10 games of the 2022 season. It was 2 years ago that we signed him to be. That would be awesome. But and people are going to say, well, Aiden, he's paid a lot. He can't be a rotational pass rusher. That would be a huge disappointment. Well, I don't care how much is he paid. I care how effective he is. And I think he's just a specialized closer pass rusher at this point. That's what they should be. That's the position what Sean McDermott and, most importantly, new defensive coordinator Bobby Babich, whether he calls plays or not, and new D-line coach Marcus West should put him in that position to succeed. Next, I might have been underrating this guy. I thought he was a fringe roster guy, but Dwayne Smoot has gotten a ton of reps. At Thursday, he got a ton of reps at the ones. Friday, he got a ton of reps at the ones. He even worked on the inside as a quasi-defensive tackle. So now we know Greg Rousseau can line up on the edge on the outside and inside as a quote-unquote quasi-defensive tackle type hybrid. And Dwayne Smoot can do that as well. He seems comfortably, and I mean comfortably, as defensive end 4 right now, and Sean McDermott and Marcus West and Bobby Babich's eyes, because he's fitting in very nicely as defensive end 4. He's been miles better by all accounts than Javon Solomon. And speaking of some of those depth pass rushers, the depth pass rushers in the likes of Javon, in the form of Javon Solomon, Kingsley Jonathan, Casey Duhill, been very quiet. Javon Solomon, if he doesn't win with his speed and burst and bend off the edge, he's like going to be inactive on game days. Like, I don't see there's any scenario where he doesn't make the team as a 5th-round pick, very productive out of Troy, but he doesn't win with power. So if he can't win with speed or bend or get in the field early and often, he'll be healthy scratch, inactive on game days. But I don't think anyone passes Dwayne Smoot for that 4th defensive end 4, that 4th defensive end role. I think he's a somewhat locked because of the moderate guaranteed money they give him. It was like 1.5 million guaranteed. So I don't think they want to eat that. They have eaten that before with OJ Howard, but it's rare. Next, linebacker. This is bigger than any like practice on the field stuff. Like, Matt Milano hasn't made any splash plays, but Matt Milano being back in the practice field is so refreshing. Like, he didn't really have any restrictions. Like, maybe he'll have some off days here and there. He has any gap, but he did all work, including all individual drills, all 7-on-7 work, and all team drills for the team portion with the 11-on-11 work. And he's been burnt a few times, but Dalton Kincaid and a few others. James Cook maybe too. But he seems a little slower than normal. That's expected, though, because of this fractured, broken leg, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, him and Terrell Bernard seeing 58 and 43 for a whole season will be like awesome. Like, just that's encouraging. That's very important to see. The two linebackers, I found this very interesting. So obviously Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard are superstar starters, but the two linebackers after them was Dorian Williams at LB3, which okay, whatever, but then Balen Spector at LB4. So he's either LB4 or he's fighting for a roster spot and doesn't make this team, as either makes the practice squad or is claimed by another another team off of waivers to make their final 53-man roster. And Nicholas Morrow was not one of those two. Like, I thought for sure the two linebackers after Milano and Bernard in the second team would be Dorian Williams and Nicholas Morrow. But I think this team loves Balen Spector. I think this team loves Balen Spector way more than we do for some reason. But Nicholas Morrow, right now, it sounds like he's fighting for a roster spot with, like, Deion Jones and maybe even Balen Spector, who's ahead of him. Like, I was not expecting that as a veteran. I thought Nicholas Morrow would for sure compete with Dorian Williams for LB3 even, but high up there as a direct backup to either Matt Milano or Terrell Bernard. But he's fighting with LB5 or 6 right now to even be on this roster. Speaking of Dorian Williams, though, he's gotten some first-team reps here and there, mainly Friday on third day 3 of training camp. Some first-team reps here and there. He showed off his pass coverage ability and his high motor play style. I want to emphasize that high motor play style because it wins him some reps sometimes and it loses him some reps sometimes. What I mean by that is I love him. He's a very high-energy player. He flies around the field. He's got the nice, long, flowing hair, so you notice him. Like, he's noticeable. But when he's asked to diagnose and pick up a blitz assignment, or when he's asked to diagnose and process and make an open field tackle, more often than not, he'll miss because he's doing too fast, or he's a pretty poor processor at this point. So, yeah. But it's nice to see that he's kind of got to hand that in a little, if you will, and kind of got to rein that in a little and not be so fast where you're overzealous with it and you're missing tackles left and right. But that's encouraging that he's getting some reps. If Matt Milano's not right to start the season or whatever with the first team. Corner, we're almost done. Corner, then safety. Cornerback. At corner, even though Christian Benford, Rasul Douglas are your locked-in starters, Kaiir Elam is getting quite a bit of reps with the first-team defense. And will continue to the rest of the training camp, according to Sean McDermott. Again, he's not going to pass up Benford and Douglas, but in the event that Benford and Douglas go down, with Benford's going on 30, not Benford, Rasul Douglas. Douglas is going on, he's 31 now, going on 32 years old. He'll get nicked up here and there. Christian Benford, 2 years length, he's got nicked up here and there as well with some hamstring and knee issues here and there. It's good to encourage that Kaiir Elam might be able to step on to the occasion. He's getting a lot of first-team reps with the first-team defense, obviously. He's still a little grabby in training camp, which would be flagged in real games, but he's almost like too physical of a corner, but his ball tracking skills are really good. He gets his hands on the ball a lot. That's what he was known for at Florida. He struggled with the Bills because he was a pure man corner coming out of Florida. Then Florida never really ran a zone defense, and the Bills, respectively, run a very heavy zone defense. So that's where things stay with Kaiir Elam. Next, it has been very quiet on the Daquan Hardy front. Like, all he's gotten is kick return opportunities. I don't know how good he did with that, but like, I'm not even sure right now. I think he'll make this roster still. Final 53-man roster still once we get the cuts in the last few days of August. But like, I'm not like completely sure if he's even the backup nickel. Like, I wanted him to be and expected him to be when he was drafted to Taron Johnson. Like, that might be Cam Lewis's role right now, and it probably will be to start the season, if not all the season. So Daquan Hardy could be the third slot as nickel corner because it could be Taron Johnson and then Cam Lewis, who can play anywhere in the secondary. I think he's best as a safety, but I think Cam Lewis is your backup nickel right now, Taron Johnson. I don't even think it's Daquan Hardy. And then two UDFAs at corners I want to shout out. Kenai Lovely from Western Michigan and Corey Couch from Miami, University of Miami. The U, as they say, from Miami. He is very familiar to Corey Couch with New Bills cornerbacks coach, corner coach Jamil Adai. He worked with Corey Couch for all 4 years in college at Miami. So that's his guy. Like, I think Kanai Lovely to Corey Couch, but more Kanai Lovely. Like, could they push a Jamarcus Ingram for that that fourth outside corner, sixth corner overall for the final 53? Or this would be really heavy and exaggerative in my opinion. But do the Bills carry 7 corners, 5 outside and 2 slot/nickel? I don't think they do that. But watch out for Kanai Lovely to Corey Couch in the preseason, man. Like, they're just really physical corners, and Kanai Lovely in particular, he's made quite a few pass breakups on all 3 days of training camp. He's been very, very noticeable. Does he take the Cam Lewis route, both these guys, where he's in the practice squad for a couple years, and then he turns into a very solid depth piece? They turn to 2 very solid depth pieces. We've seen this development path for guys like Cam Lewis, and now it's DeMarcus Ingram's turn, and now Alec Anderson, Ryan Vandermark, but mainly defensive backs, examples like Cam Lewis and now Jamarcus Ingram. And then at safety, last position of the day. I just have one big main point here I wrote down. Taylor Rapp is obviously your one for sure starter. I don't love Taylor Rapp. I think sometimes he's a lot more time, often than not, very much to my dismay, he's too physical. Like, there's a lot of friendly fire there. Like, he's injuring himself, or like I said, more often than not, unfortunately, injuring his teammates. Like, he's got to rein that in a little. Like, not be so physical. His coverage ability is very hit or miss, but he's been the starting safety all 3 days, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. He was the first starting safety. But the second starting safety opposite him has been a rotation. Very interesting. Everyone got their own turn. On Wednesday, it was Damar Hamlin with Rapp. On Thursday, it was Mike Edwards in that role. And then Friday, it was Cole Bishop's turn. Cole Bishop is the one most interesting to me, because Sean McDermott, you know him, especially in rookies. He doesn't want to put too much pressure on him. He barely says anything about players. He barely kind of praises or calls out players in particular. But he was asked about Cole Bishop and what his role will be this year, and he was very candid. He said, and these comments were very interesting, telling, in my opinion. I almost feel like he was calling him out a little, because McDermott, in his opening press conference, very first press conference of training camp, like he does every year around this time at St. John Fisher University, Cole Bishop is a guy that's got to stay in shape. He's got to come hungry. He's got to come work. And then Bobby Babich on Friday, 2 days later, said Cole Bishop has to realize and take this with a day-by-day mentality. And it didn't sound like he was going to get any opportunities to work at the ones, but he got his own full day Friday. So that's very interesting. McDermott said Bishop's role initially might be Cole Bishop's initial role might be in some dime packages. So Jordan, which means they go 3 safeties on the field at once, but then you have to take someone off. But the positive thing is, by all reports and accounts, Cole Bishop is lightning quick off the blitz. So maybe he's like come down to a pseudo hybrid linebacker type player, and that's how he gets on the field in some certain dime or physical packages on like obvious passing downs, or maybe he's near the line of scrimmage and some run plays. Either way, I think Cole Bishop will have somewhat of a role this year. I just don't expect him to start, but I didn't know that they were going to give him a full day with the ones with the first team defense after those comments from McDermott and Babich. Most importantly, I said this, like, I've been saying this for the last month or so now on this podcast, and really internally and like forever. I think my bold prediction right now, which might not sound so bold anymore, hot take, whatever you want to call it, Damar Hamlin will be your 2 starting safeties. Come week 1 will be Taylor Rapp and Damar Hamlin. Hear me out here. I've said this multiple times. If you haven't heard it, yeah, you'll hear it now. If you have, sorry, you'll hear it again. Cole Bishop is a rookie. He has a very similar play style to Taylor Rapp. They play similarly. Okay, whatever. Mike Edwards, he always been more of a third safety in his career. Okay. Damar Hamlin, he is the most time on task with Sean McDermott, Bobby Babich in this defense. Heading in his 4th year in the league. He could be considered a veteran now at this point. I think it's going to be Taylor Rapp and Damar Hamlin. So that's where I think things stand with the whole Mike Edwards, Cole Bishop, and Taylor. Except for sure start, but Mike Edwards, Cole Bishop, and Damar Hamlin. Sorry, I got his name for a minute. So I'll be very interested to see what's the date today, July 27th, Saturday. So in 2 days, on Monday, July 29th, I'll be very interested to see what happens. Will they go back to Damar Hamlin and start the rotation all over again? Will they give the rookie Cole Bishop another full day with the ones? How will this all shake out? I think in preseason, You start Taylor Rapp all 3 games. I'm not saying they'll do this. This is what I would do, though, if I were Sean McDermott and Bobby Babich. You start Taylor Rapp at one of the safety spots all 3 games. And then there's 3 preseason games, so it fits perfectly. You give Cole Bishop a game to start with Rapp. You give Mike Edwards a game to start with Rapp. And then, most importantly, who I think will be the ultimate starter come week 1 with Rapp, you would give DeMar Hamlin a game to start with Rapp. That's how I would approach it, like, personally, but yeah. So anyways, guys, this is just kind of a fun recap of my biggest notes and takeaways. We went position by position to kind of give a more structured view and a structured style for today's episode, if you will. So I will be back in the middle of next week. So let's see. The Bills practice on Sunday, July 28th, Monday, July 29th, and Tuesday, July 30th. And then Wednesday, July 31st is another off day. So I'll tend to be here on off days to recap the next 3 or 4 training camp practices in between the off days. So next episode of this will be next Wednesday, July 31st. So look out for that. Anyways, guys, thank you for checking out today's episode of Around the Slice. Quickly, before I get out of here, if you like my content and want bonus, extra exclusive content found nowhere else, including in this podcast, exclusively on Patreon for just $3 a month, you can go sign up for that at patreon.com/aroundtheslice. You can follow me personally on Twitter at awangan13. I post about everything from football, basketball, any other sport, pop culture, whatever. And then you can follow the show on Twitter at Around Slice. And lastly, you can, of course, watch or listen to this podcast on Twitter or on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. I would love to hear from you down in the comments below if you're on YouTube. If you're not, come on over. We'd love to have you subscribe, like, comment, share, do all that fun stuff. Comment what has been your biggest takeaways. I'd love to have a conversation with you down there from training camp so far, just through 3 days. Again, I'll be back Wednesday, July 31st, to recap the next chunk of training camp practices, being the next 3 or 4 practices. I will see you next week on that date. Thank you for tuning in today. This is a great episode. Hope you enjoyed. Bye.